Hi there, I just wanted to make another video about the realistic serious grip from LCT. I have already made one where I installed the LCT slim grip on my E&L AK-74MN Airsoft. But this video was rather basic, and in this one I want to get into a little bit more detail. This video should be a little bit more instructional, and I want to give you also a few more tips on how to install this LCT slim grip with slim motor. In my last video I lied a little bit because I've said that the LCT slim grip is a slip-on part which you can just put on your E&L receiver and that's it. It's kinda true, but for a really perfect fit you have to remove a little bit of material at the front here on the grip in order to get rid of a little gap here between the receiver and the grip, and so that the trigger guard doesn't bend like a bow upwards. You can see this in the last video I made. So this is also something I want to show you. This is the LCT slim grip. This is the bakelite version. Here are a few info for you. For LCT AG version 3 box. If it non-LCT products we can't sure compatible or not. So this English is almost as good as mine. Here are also again a few more details of the grips. And this is the grip you get. I've chosen the bakelite grip in order to give the E&L AKM a little bit more realistic look. The slim motor, and you get also a screw to mount the grip onto your receiver. So in this video I want to show you how to install this grip onto the E&L AKM. Just one tip I want to give you: if this looks a little bit too shiny for you, you can use steel wool. I used 4O steel wool, so this is pretty fine wool, and you can make this shininess a little bit more dull. On this side of the grip I've already used the steel wool on it, and it's not as shiny as this side anymore, and I will do this side also, just for your comparison, so you can see what you can make out of this grip. I have also used a file to remove the this cast line here. On the original bakelite grips you can also see that they removed material at the middle of the grip, so this doesn't look too unrealistic. I will leave it as it is now, so I will not paint the grip anymore. This looks fine to me. So now for installing the grip and the motor you have to obviously disassemble the airsoft. And when you want to install the slim grip, I recommend highly not just remove the old grip and the old motor and replace the parts. This motor is a little bit different. There are 3 things to consider. You have to adjust the pinion to bevel gear height, and on this motor you do this by rotating this mounting bracket by 180 degrees. So this can't be adjusted in such small steps as on the E&L motor by twisting a screw. And you have to take into account that there's an offset of this pinion gear at this mounting bracket. You can see that on the right side the pinion is closer to this edge than it is on this side. And another thing to consider is to reshim your gearbox. I highly recommend it, and I will show you how to set the gear height, how to make sure that you install it in the correct way with the mounting bracket and how to reshim your rifle. So the first step we do now is to disassemble the rifle. Remove the cleaning rod first. After that, remove the muzzle brake. Remove the dust cover, the recoil spring and the fake bolt. Then you can remove the gas tube and the lower handguard. Now you can remove the steel outer barrel, and for this you have to unscrew 2 grub screws with a 2 mm Allen key. And after that you have to remove 2 bolts, but before you undo the bolts, first undo the 2 nuts. For these 2 bolts use a 2.5 mm Allen key. And then you can remove the barrel from the receiver. Now you can remove the hop-up unit from the gearbox with inner barrel by unscrewing this screw with a 2.5 mm Allen key. Unscrew the bolt from the bottom of the pistol grip. Remove pistol grip. Most of the time the bolt that secures the fire mode selector to the receiver is already loose. Remove the bolt, and if you can't do it by hand, use a pair of pliers. So remove the bolt, don't lose this bushing, and now you can already get the gearbox out of the steel receiver. Now you can already test fit your slim grip to the E&L receiver, and as you can see, when I push the pistol grip against the receiver, the trigger guard bends slightly upwards. This isn't as bad as on my other E&L gun, because this grip has already a lot of material removed here. I have now ground off a little bit of material on both sides here and in the middle, and you can see that the trigger guard gets only pushed just a little bit into the direction of the receiver, and this is what you want. You want a little bit tension left on the trigger guard. It's almost exactly the same amount as on the original grip, and so you get, with this little bit of tension, you get a sturdier connection between the grip and the receiver. And this part here gets squished between this edge here and the grip anyway, so this can't move up and down. Remove the connectors from the motor. Again, remove it. At the beginning of this video I've told you that the mounting bracket of the slim motor has a slight offset to it, and the best way to determine which way the mounting bracket should face the bevel gear inside the gearbox is by bringing the mating surfaces of both motors at one level, so they align, this one and this one, they should be at the same height, and at the same time the pinion gears should also be level, which they are now. And when you now install the standard E&L motor to the gearbox, you should see a little bit of play of the bevel gear, which there is. And when installing the slim motor correctly, you should have almost exactly the same play, which there is. And when you install it with the wrong side facing the bevel gear, you will first notice that it's harder to put the motor inside the gearbox. And now you will have zero play anymore, and you can also see that the bevel gear is pushed up. So this is a good indication that this is not the side you want to install the motor into the gearbox, but you use this side. To set the correct pinion to bevel gear height and to reshim, we have to disassemble the gearbox. I have cleaned every part that was full of grease, and they are now all clean. To adjust the pinion gear height to the bevel gear, I have temporarily attached the motor to the gearbox. Make sure that the gearbox and the motor is flush, and also the bevel gear sits straight in its position. And then you have to make sure that the bottom of the pinion gear is in line with the outer edge of the bevel gear. So now we have correctly positioned the mounting bracket to the gearbox, and we have set the motor height. The only thing we have to do now is to reshim the gearbox. A little tip I can give you is when the motor sits pretty loose inside the mounting bracket, you can add 1 or 2 additional O-rings. The motor already comes with 1 O-ring attached, but sometimes it's better, or it gets sturdier if you add 1 or 2 more O-rings to this one. After we have correctly installed the motor with the right side of the mounting bracket, and after setting the correct motor height, we can now start reshimming the pinion to bevel gear. We start by adding shims. on this side of the bevel gear. The bevel gear still has a little bit of play, and we want to reduce this play as much as possible. I have now added shims only to this side. And the bevel gear has now the right amount of side-to-side play. We can now shim this side of the bevel gear to remove the up and down play that is left. Both sides of the bevel gear are now shimmed. The bevel gear spins freely inside the gearbox, and there's very minimal play left. And now we can install the motor and check for bevel gear to pinion gear play. And the bevel gear has also very minimal play, as it should be. Now that we have successfully shimmed the bevel gear, we can now shim the spur gear, and the spur gear is really easy to shim because only 2 to 3 rules apply. The first one is that you have to make sure that this gear doesn't rub against the gearbox or against the bushings. And you can hear that the gear is now rubbing against the gearbox because there are no shims installed, obviously. And you have to make sure that when installing the bevel gear, that the spur gear, that this part of the spur gear here doesn't rub against this part of the bevel gear. I have now correctly shimmed the spur gear. I have not closed the gearbox yet, so you can see that the spur gear doesn't rub against the gearbox shell on this side or against the bushings. And when you close the shell, the spur gear has very minimal up and down play, and it does rotate freely inside the gearbox. I have now installed the spur gear and the bevel gear, and both gears should move freely now without any rubbing noises, which they do. So these two gears are now correctly shimmed. Same rules for the sector gear apply as for the spur gear. The sector gear should not touch anything from the gearbox, and the sector gear should sit high enough so that this surface here doesn't touch the surface from the spur gear, and it should sit high enough so that it makes as much contact with the gear teeth on the piston as possible. So it should not sit this, more like this. The height of the sector gear is now set correctly, and it does only have very minimal up and down play. Rotates freely on its own without any other gears installed. Now all 3 gears are shimmed correctly and installed in the gearbox, and I will now show you how all 3 work together. Gearbox is now assembled with motor installed. Let's do a quick test. Works perfectly. When connecting the motor to the electrical system, you have to make sure that the wires don't overlap each other at this point here, otherwise you won't be able to slip the grip on. And you have to make sure that the connectors don't stick up at this level here, otherwise you will crush them. So you have to bend both connectors approximately 90 degrees so they can clear the bottom part of the motor. So now you will be able to fit the grip onto the gearbox. The last step now is to put on the grip, and it should fit perfectly. So now the grip is installed without a gap and without too much bent trigger guard, and it's rock solid. It doesn't move. You can't twist the grip, just like it should be, like the stock grip. So this is how you install the slim grip to your E&L AKM or any other E&L model. Here's a size comparison between the slim grip and the standard E&L grip. You can see that the slim grip is a lot thinner and also a little bit shorter. Slim grip is 25.1 millimeters thick and the standard E&L grip 30.7 millimeters. The length of the standard E&L grip is 112.1 millimeters and length of the slim grip is 108.6